Hello everyone, my name is Jessie Ammons and I am a reference and instruction librarian for UW-Oshkosh Libraries. As the library liaison to the College of Education and Human Services, I primarily work with students in these departments. In this video, I'll give you an overview of how to find credible research for graduate level classes. First, we'll do a quick tour of the website to identify the various resources and services that will be helpful in your research. Next, we'll discuss the types of academic sources that you will encounter when doing graduate level research. Finally, we'll discuss setting up and refining your search through search strategies and narrowing your topic. We'll end with a few useful tips. Let's get started. The first things I want to draw your attention to are all the ways that you can get help from librarians. You'll see these help buttons on our homepage here. If you need help finding articles, choosing a database, figuring out if a source is reliable, feel free to hop on our 24/7 library chat service. Depending on the time of day, you'll talk to either a librarian on our staff or a librarian from another university who helps us staff the service at other hours. You can also email me directly or email our reference and instruction team for help with more in-depth questions. Finally, I am happy to meet with you virtually, in person, or via a phone call. Here are a few of the things I can help you with in one of these sessions. You can make an appointment either by emailing me or via the Research Appointment help button on the website. Okay, now let's take a look at some of the other important parts of the website. Our main search feature is called Search at UW. Search at UW searches all of the physical materials in all of the UW campus libraries, but more importantly, it searches all of the UW-Oshkosh Library's digital collections, including peer-reviewed articles and journals. Search at UW is great for a few things, but it can be overwhelming if you're using it as a starting point for your research. If you're looking for exact titles or authors, or you're looking for books, it can be an excellent tool. For example, you may be required to find specific articles for your course readings from a bibliography. To find a specific article, you'll want to put the title into Search at UW and change the drop-down menu on the right to Articles. Let's try it out. Let's say I'm looking for this article, The Role of Home Literacy Practices in Kindergarten Children's Early Writing Development, a one-year longitudinal study. As I said, you'll type or paste the title into the box here and change the drop-down menu on the right to Articles. Then click Search. From here, it should be one of the first or second results on the list. If you don't see it, you can choose Expand My Results, and it might pop up then. Click on the title when you do find it. Scroll down a bit, and you'll see the list of databases we have this article in. Click into any of them, and you will be prompted to log in. And you should be able to locate the full text of the article from here. For most of your research, however, librarians recommend that you use library databases. These databases are carefully curated to specific subject areas. Although they may be difficult to navigate at first, once you work with them for a few sessions and you learn a few of the tricks, you won't want to use anything else. Databases are generally how most scholars locate items. So which database will be the best for you? ERIC is generally considered the best for educational research. We'll go into more detail about how it works later in the video, but to find a database on our website, you can click on our complete list here, where it says Resources A to Z, or you can find it via our subject guides here, where it says Resources by Subject. When you click into any database on our website, whether it's through our database list, the subject guides, or via Search at UW, you will be prompted to log in with your NetID and password the first time you use it. Your NetID and password are the same login that you use to access Canvas. If you have any issues with it, please contact our IT help desk at 920-424-3020. So that was a quick overview of our website. Now we'll move on to the types of academic sources that you'll probably come across, as well as which ones you'll want to focus on. Generally, in your research, you'll encounter 4 different broad types of resources. Unpublished research usually takes the form of government reports or conference proceedings. With educational research, you will probably come across quite a few government reports. It's important to remember that while you may need to use them for some information, such as statistics, these reports are not considered scholarly or peer-reviewed. Try to use them only when necessary. In a similar category, you'll sometimes see dissertations or theses from other graduate students. These are usually pretty long, often 100 or more pages, and they are also not peer-reviewed, but they can be helpful leading you to other articles that are. Generally, you'll want to focus the bulk of your research on journal articles, specifically those that are peer-reviewed. Sometimes books will be helpful, but remember that they won't be as current as peer-reviewed articles. So I've used the word peer-reviewed quite a few times so far. You may or may not already know what this means, but let's do a quick review just in case. Peer review is a process by which articles are evaluated for quality, accuracy, originality, credibility by experts in the field. Peer review is currently the best indicator of quality articles that we have in academia. Like any human process, there is room for error, but in general, these are the articles that you should be looking for in your research. So how can you tell if an article is peer-reviewed? Both Search at UW and the library databases like ERIC have filters that allow you to search only peer-reviewed articles. Here's what the peer-reviewed icon looks like in Search at UW. And here's what it looks like in ERIC. Y stands for yes. Another way to be absolutely sure is to find the journal's homepage. Usually on the journal's homepage, you'll find an About Us section or a journal overview that will indicate whether they have a peer review process in place. You can also chat or email us to ask if you're still unsure. At this point, you might be asking, I've always used Google or Google Scholar successfully in the past to find my sources. Why should I use library resources instead? This is a good question. While it's ultimately up to you where and how you search, I do have a few reasons that Google may not be the best place to go. Like many things on the internet, there are pros and cons to it. It can be an excellent source for government websites and reports, but there's no way to filter out unreliable information. Even Google Scholar doesn't have a filter for peer-reviewed articles only, and just because an article looks scholarly doesn't mean it's peer-reviewed. Experts do occasionally use Google Scholar for some things, such as looking up the body of one author's work, or looking up to see who has cited a specific article in their research, but generally, at the beginning of your research journey, you really want to learn how to utilize library databases. Now, a new question that we might get is using artificial intelligence, such as ChatGPT. Many people now expect that they can just ask any of these AI services to find articles for them. Unfortunately, at this stage in its development, AI has falsified information and completely made up articles that don't exist. There are possibilities in the future for this, but remember that it will be a tool like any others that we use. Let's move on to the actual searching strategies for using the library databases or Search at UW. The first thing you want to do after you have figured out what topics you want to research is to identify the main concepts that you want to research. In this very basic example, I formed a research question and boiled the main concepts down to professional learning communities and student achievement. Most likely, your question or topic might be more complex than this, but this basic example will help illustrate some of these searching strategies. Once you've identified those main concepts, you'll want to list any synonyms or related terms that you can think of. This will help you refine your search. Also consider whether there are plural or singular forms of any of your terms. Now, what do you do with those synonyms? That's where search operators come in. We use certain words to let the databases know how we want to search. If you connect two words or phrases with "and" in between, it tells the database that you want it to search for articles that include both of these words or phrases. If you put "or" in between words or phrases, it tells the database to look for articles with one or the other, or both. It broadens your search and gives you more articles, but they may be less relevant. Not is the easiest to understand. If you put it before a word or phrase, it will eliminate articles with that word or phrase in it. So for a very simplified example, let's try PB&J. If I put peanut butter and jelly into the database's search boxes, it will only look for articles that use both peanut butter and jelly in them somewhere. If I put peanut butter or jelly into the database search boxes, it will search for articles that maybe one mentions peanut butter, maybe one mentions jelly, and maybe it's both. It will give you more results, but as I said earlier, they might be less relevant to your research. For the sake of this example, you could use not jam, but I didn't illustrate that here. Here's another simplified way of saying it. Let's try it out with our non-PB&J example from earlier. First, I'll find the Education Research Database, ERIC, and log in. This is the interface you will see with any of the EBSCOhost databases. One thing that's important to note is that all of the EBSCO databases use the same interface. EBSCOhost is the company that packages these databases together, but the name of the database you're in is listed right here. So it's important to make sure you know which database you're searching in. So the easiest way to understand is to keep one concept per box. So I'll use the first box for the concept of professional learning communities. I'll put in professional learning communities or professional learning teams or PLTs or PLCs. You can see here that the database automatically uses AND, which you could change to or not, but I suggest you keep it as AND. In the second box, we'll use student achievement. And you can see sometimes the database will give you examples here. So I'll type in student achievement or student success or academic achievement or student growth. These terms don't all mean exactly the same things, but we're just trying to get into the right area of research for our topic. Then I'll click search. This is what the result page looks like. First, after you've clicked search, you want to refine your results. These are the filters on the left here. These are incredibly important. First, you almost always want to select the peer-reviewed filter. So now you should only be seeing articles that are peer-reviewed. Then you'll want to change the publication date here. Generally in the field of education, we suggest you look about 10 years back for the bulk of your research, unless you're looking for seminal works, which are pivotal studies in the field. Then you'll take a look through the list. Of course, it depends on how you like to do your search, but I like to look at the title, and then I look at the subjects here to get a feel for whether this is my area that I'm looking for. Once you decide one might be more helpful than another, you click on the title, and you'll be taken to the index page. Here you'll see information that you'll need for a citation, so authors, the name of the journal, the volume number, page numbers, when it came out. Again, you'll see the peer-reviewed filter, that this one is peer-reviewed. I also like to look through the descriptors here, not only again to see if it's relevant to your area of study, but I also look through these to see if maybe there's a key word that I might be missing that I can use to refine my search if I want to try to get better results. The most important part, I would say, is the abstract, which gives you a summary of the article. Make sure you read this through to see if you think it will be relevant. And then, if all of those things indicate that it's relevant to your area of research, you want to find the full text. Now in ERIC, usually you'll see on the left where it says full text, you'll have to click that, and then they have an extra step where you have to download the full text from here. Other EBSCO databases, you'll just see a PDF icon on the left here. And then you should be able to download from here. A few things to consider when you're identifying these terms. Is there a narrower or broader term that you may want to consider? For example, perhaps you are interested in interventions for students with disabilities. You would probably get far too many results to sift through with this question. You may want to be more specific and search for something like academic interventions and students with learning disabilities. You may also want to consider how your database defines the term. Different databases use different tags for different topic areas, and it may not be what you're used to calling something. Let me show you an example. So, returning to our previous search, we're back on the ERIC results page. If you look up here, you can see where it says thesaurus. Now, all of the EBSCO host databases have something similar, but they call it something different depending on which one you're in. In ERIC, this is called thesaurus. What you can do is type in one of your search terms. I'll type in student achievement. And what it will tell you is what the database actually tags for that topic area. So it might give me another keyword that I can add to my list of synonyms. Another thing you can do is, if you find an article that's perfect for what you're looking for, identify which keywords they use. Usually, as I said, it will be on that record page or the index page, or it will be on the first or second page of the actual text of the article. You can add those keywords to your list and use them in your next search. These are a few advanced tips that I don't suggest you use until you've gotten comfortable with the previous examples. One is called truncation. This is when you add a symbol at the end of a root word to look for varied endings. Generally, this is your answer to plural terms. However, you may have noticed in my example, we didn't actually use them. Sometimes the databases are smart enough to pick it up without you actually using it. Quotation marks you may actually be familiar with. You would use these in a search when you want to find the phrase exactly as you have written it in exactly that order. So as in my example, if I wanted them to find professional learning communities next to each other in that order, I would try quotation marks. Now, I would only use quotation marks if you're finding that the database is not finding the phrase exactly as you've written it. As I said, generally the databases are smart enough to realize what you're looking for. Just to quickly show you by looking at our example again, if I wanted to use truncation, because I have a plural word here, I would go back to the root word here and put my asterisk here. So it's not exactly the definition of a root word, but you put it wherever the endings start varying. Now, if I wanted to use the quotation marks, I would put them around the phrase like this. So again, that shows the database that I want only articles that use student achievement next to each other in that order. Otherwise, the database might look for, okay, it uses the word student here and achievement somewhere else, but maybe it doesn't use them together. So let me try changing the search here. And you probably didn't notice, but before I had 1,400 articles, now I only have 800. I didn't mention this earlier, but because you're using such refined search strategies, generally you're going to get fewer results than you're used to with, say, a simple Google search. We usually say the sweet spot of a good search is about 300 to 500 articles in your results page. So again, that's something you have to get used to when you're using databases. A few things to look out for. You might have terms with multiple meanings or concepts, and then you'll see articles that use the terms for both of those meanings. There's not really a way to prevent that because you can't use the not because it's the same term and you don't want to knock out the relevant results. Another thing that a lot of people struggle with at the beginning of their search is undefined concepts. So we're used to using words like impact, advantages, benefits, effect, and while these words are totally fine in your research question, they don't really help you when you're doing your actual search in a database. As I said, they're undefined, and so the database is not going to find incredibly relevant results when you use them. They don't really add to your search. You can try using them and taking a look just to see, but that might end up limiting you a little bit. As I showed you in our example earlier, on the left of the search results page, you will see the Refine Your Results section. This is where you can apply those filters and date, the publication date, the peer-reviewed or scholarly, and language are the ones that I suggest you use. However, you may want to take a look and see all of the options when you're using those limiters. Now, narrowing your topic can actually be more difficult than you would expect. A lot of people, when they first start these graduate level classes, they start with very broad research questions, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you may find over the course of your searches that you need to do a little bit of narrowing for better results. Now, some tips for narrowing your topic might seem a little bit simple, but it's good to go back to the basics if you're having trouble with your search. So you might want to consider looking at specific populations, for example, secondary students versus looking at all of K-12. Some research studies that you might find will also mention areas for future research that they feel like would be helpful. So you could say, oh, I think that that's a good idea. I want to research that area. Creating a concept map can sometimes be helpful to take a step back from your question. And then sometimes just asking yourself what question you really want to answer can be helpful. Generally, I suggest you avoid multi-part or fuzzy questions. However, I do feel like sometimes multi-part questions are important in the research process. Just make sure that you separate out the different parts when you're actually doing your searching. And then sometimes even specifying a specific country or region. For example, some education students like to specifically look in the Midwest. However, looking specifically in Wisconsin can limit their results too much. So you might have to broaden if you pick too specific of a region. Okay, let's end with some useful tips. So again, once you've found a few articles that really fit into the area of research that you're looking for, read through them and check their literature reviews and bibliographies. Those will lead you to other articles that you can use, including those seminal works that I mentioned before. You'll start seeing the same authors pop up over and over again, so keep track of which authors are really in the area that you want to research and look at their whole body of work. Something to take note of are different trends in the research that will help you shape and guide what areas you want to look into. I do want to illustrate how to use Google Scholar to look up a body of an author's work. So I used the previous example that we found, and I copied Shauna Anderson's name. So I'm in Google Scholar, and I can just paste her name in here. And then you can see the authors listed right here. Now, unfortunately, not all authors have this feature. So I can see that Shauna Anderson does not, because when I look at her name on here, there's not an underline. However, if the author does have an underline under it, it's a link to a page with all of their articles here. Now, Google Scholar doesn't necessarily have the full text of that article, and also these articles may not be related at all. It looks like the person I picked is actually a medical researcher. But if somebody that you want to look up is in Google Scholar, that can be a really helpful tool. You can also use Search at UW for the same feature. So I'll just copy and paste her name in here. And I'll look up everything just to see if she has books. But again, Search at UW is slightly limited, and you'll find that it's popping up people that are not this particular author. Now, something that you might encounter is the Find It button. This is an orange button that appears throughout all of the UW Oshkosh databases. It does show up when you're searching in a database that only has the bibliographic info of an article, but not the full text. It is really helpful because it might lead you to an article that we have somewhere else, but some people find it confusing at first. Let me show you how it works. Back to our previous example, I'm on the results page here, and let's say I'm scrolling and I come across this article that looks interesting to me based on the title and the subjects, but it has the orange Find It button. Now, remember, the Find It button means that this database has the bibliographic information. So when I click into it, it has where the article comes from, what journal, who the authors are, but there's no link to a full text. You might ask, why do we even index these articles in here? And that's because it can be helpful to find it somewhere else. So I'm going to actually click on the Find It button here. And it will take me back to the UW Oshkosh Libraries page on the record page of this article. If you scroll down a little bit where it says View Online, you'll see possibly other databases that we have this article in. And you can click the link and follow. And now I can download the PDF of the article from here instead. Sometimes you'll see instead a link that says Request via Interlibrary Loan, which I'll talk about in just a minute. So this is helpful because you don't want to limit yourself to only full text on this page here, because you might come across an article that you can find via the Find It button or, again, Interlibrary Loan. So what is Interlibrary Loan? This is a service that almost all libraries provide. If we don't have the full text of an article or a specific book that you're looking for, we can use this service to try to get it from another library. So again, let's say you've come across an article with the Find It button here, and it's one that you want to look through. So you can click the Find It button again. And of course, you'll need to sign in. And instead of View Online and a list of databases, you will see this Request via Interlibrary Loan. So you can click the link, you'll have to sign in again, and you'll be taken to the Interlibrary Loan page. From here, it should auto-populate information from the article, although sometimes it doesn't include all of it, so I'll have to go back and put the journal title here. Now you can see only the red asterisks are what you have to fill in. And if this is the first time using Interlibrary Loan, you will have to indicate a pickup location. However, because this is an online resource, this will be emailed to you. So just because you're picking a physical location doesn't mean you'll have to come and pick it up in person. And then you would just submit the request, and it would then show as pending on your Interlibrary Loan page here. And then you'll get an email in a couple days, usually 2 to 3, that says, click this link to get the article. We can get most articles. Unfortunately, there are a few that we cannot get, and that includes physical books as well. So we will do as much as we can to get you the articles that you need. And you'll find with graduate level research that there will be articles that you really want to find versus undergraduate research, where generally you just are sort of trying to find whatever fits in that moment. My suggestion as you start gathering articles that you're using is to download each as a PDF and then save it to your device, probably in a folder specifically for this class and then for this assignment. A lot of students, unfortunately, will save the web address, the URL at the top, and unfortunately that is session specific. What you want to save, if you want to save a link at all, is the permalink. Let me show you what I mean. So here on our results page, let's say I've found this article and I want to look at the PDF full text. From here, my first suggestion would be to download it to your device. Make sure that you're not just downloading it to your downloads folder. Make sure you're actually saving it to a folder on your device, because the downloads folder will sometimes automatically delete itself. However, my other suggestion is that you save the permalink. So on the right here, you'll see the permalink option, and it pops up right here. Now, as I said, some students will accidentally save this address, this web address, and unfortunately that is session specific. So the second that I close out of this tab, that web address or URL will no longer bring me to this page. So you don't want to make that mistake. So if you want to save a link to it, make sure that you save the permalink. Now, some students like to save it to an EBSCOhost account. That is a different account than the one that you've signed into using your NetID. That's one that you actually have to create on your own. And unfortunately, it doesn't tell you whether you're signed in or not if you click save. So I'm not signed into anything right now. If I click save and just click save here, it makes it seem as if it has saved the article, but it's not saving it to anything because I'm not signed in. So some people have great success creating a folder in EBSCOhost, creating their own account, and remembering to sign in. It's not something that I suggest that you do. Other people might try using Google Drive. However, I have seen a lot of mistakes made with both Google Drive and OneDrive. Sometimes when it brings the articles over, it just turns it into random HTML code sequences. So my suggestion is to download the PDF full text to your device. And that way, if for some reason the university no longer subscribes to this journal, then you still have the copy of the article that you want to keep for your research. I'm going to end by showing you how to search a specific journal, which you may want to do if you find one that's especially relevant to your area of research. Now, the journals that I've listed here are specific to literacy education, but I'm just going to use the first one as an example, the Reading Teacher. All you need to do is go to the UW Oshkosh Libraries page, and in the box, type the name of the journal. Then click Search. The first result is the journal. You can see it says journal right here, so I'll click here. And under View Online, it will give me the list of databases that have articles from this journal. So I'll just click on the first one. In general, if it has an EBSCOhost database, I like to use those, and I'll show you why. So you can just browse articles on the right here based on the year and then the issue, volume and issue. But the reason I like to search the EBSCO databases is because they have a search within this publication feature. So I can click here, and again, it is showing me the EBSCOhost database. Now it's having me look in Academic Search Complete, which is not ERIC. However, because it has all of the articles from the Reading Teacher, it will show me what I need it to show me. So I will leave this in the first search box, and then I'll put my search term in the second one. So let's say I'm just looking for independent reading and first grade. I will get back fewer results than I'm used to, so this has only brought back 11 results. And that is because it is only searching this one journal, the Reading Teacher. You might also find that the results are a lot less relevant to my search or your search, and that is because, again, there are so few articles that fit this topic with the Reading Teacher. In this case, I don't have to click peer-reviewed because I already know that this journal is a peer-reviewed journal. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the video. Please feel free to reach out to me at my email address, ammonsj@uwash.edu, or you can call me at my office number, 920-424-2320. I'd be happy to meet with you or help you in any way to find the articles for your research.